Amazon versus Hachette. You may have heard about the battle between these two conglomerates in the news. Authors unwillingly have been dragged into the middle and are paying a high price. The dispute is over ebook pricing. And while you may not have a book deal with Hachette, the outcome of this and other online publishing wars impact every author, as well as future authors.
So for those who may not understand what a conflict is all about, we want to discuss it and explore what exactly is at stake. Here to help us is Aram Sinreich, Assistant Professor at Rutgers University School of Communication and Information and author of The Piracy Crusade, How the Music Industry's War on Sharing Destroys Markets and Erodes Civil Liberties. Aram, thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Okay, so people need to understand now. We mentioned before that it's about the money and the power between Amazon and Hachette, and we know that has to deal with ebooks, but of course it's more complicated than that. Could you just give us a basic overview?
Yeah, sure. So Amazon is the biggest bookseller in the world. They sell about half the books in America and about 2/3 of the ebooks in America. That gives them a tremendous amount of power over the marketplace. Hachette is one of the big 5 publishers. They have historically enjoyed being the middleman between the authors and the consumers, and they've enjoyed the power of setting the prices and setting the terms by which consumers can gain access to books.
But now somebody else has that power.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is essentially a giant spitting war between two mega corporations.
So why is Amazon setting the price at $9.99? When they could get more than that. And what is Hachette? Why are they resisting?
Well, so my publisher calls it crack pricing, and the idea is that consumers have a magic price point below which they're willing to make an impulse buy. Now, when it comes to songs, that's 99 cents, and Steve Jobs pioneered that model when it came to the music industry.
Okay.
But when it comes to books, it's $9.99. Once we pass the $10 mark, all of a sudden we start to see the bills piling up in our eyes. So Amazon is very intelligently trying to set the bar at the sweet spot where consumers are going to be willing to buy the greatest number of ebooks because they perceive it as being at the lowest cost. So the basic idea is that even though we might be paying less, in aggregate, we the consumers are going to be paying more because we're going to be buying more books.
Okay.
Now,
how exactly is Amazon handling it? I understand they've had some kind of punitive measures against Hachette.
yeah, this is also inside baseball, but basically what Amazon has done is they've disallowed consumers from the ability to pre-order Hachette books on the site.
Oh.
And they've also not given the customary discount that a lot of newly released titles get, which means that the books on Amazon are going to be $10 or $15 more than you would find on a competing website like Kobo.com or Barnes & Noble. They've also made it more difficult to find the books in the searching interface and won't promote the books when consumers go to the Amazon homepage.
And they're not doing that for any other publishers, just Hachette.
No, this is just purely punitive, just messing with Hachette, basically flexing their muscles and trying to prove that they can, with a flip of a switch, interrupt Hachette's sales and diminish their revenues by a factor of 20 or 30%.
So this is hurting Hachette's sales. And so, Amazon, they offered royalties to authors? And right? Am I wrong on this?
Yeah, well, so Amazon has proposed a kind of settlement where they go direct and they pay the author rather than paying Hachette and letting Hachette pay the author. Now, this has actually been happening again in the music industry where a lot of this stuff has been hashed out for the first time.
Sure.
Where you got a service like, for instance, Spotify, or Pandora, they don't always pay the record label and let the record label pay the artist. Under certain circumstances, they pay the artist directly. And that means that the artist gets more money in the long run because they don't have to wait around for the record label to make their money back. So the same thing is happening in books. Basically, Amazon is arguing that they're going to be a better middleman between the publisher and the reader than, between the author and the reader than the publisher can be. They're saying, we're going to give you, Mr. Author, or Ms. Author, a bigger piece of the pie. We're going to give you, Mr. or Ms. Consumer, a lower cost. And you, Mr. and Ms. Publisher, you're a dinosaur and you can just kind of get out of here and leave us
So are
your
the
piece of
authors
pie.
okay with this? How did they take this or they respond?
Well, so the authors who are kind of accustomed to being the winners of the old school publishing industry have all banded together and they have a group called Authors United, where they're arguing that that the value of their work is being devalued by these machinations on Amazon's part. But then again, there are tens or hundreds of thousands of smaller publishers, publishers with independent presses, publishers who self-publish like yourself, for whom Amazon's like the greatest thing that ever happened, because all of a sudden it's not a question of whether your book's going to be on the bookshelf in the store. It's going to be a question of how easy your book is to find, because the bookshelves are functionally infinite.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's really, it's not like there's a single good guy and a single bad guy here.
Sure.
These are two different corporations, each of which wants to control that relationship between publisher and reader, and neither of which is really looking out for the best interests of either.
So I would say that the average author perspective is pretty much what you just said. Now, what about the average consumer? It certainly sounds, hey, I would love to get a cheaper price for a book.
Right.
But there's always more behind the scenes. Are there any, other sides of that? What are the pros and the cons of the situation?
Well, we have, as consumers, we've adapted very quickly to internet retail, and we've come to expect everything to be, Amazon is now experimenting with drones so they can bring you toilet paper while you're still sitting in the bathroom.
Yeah.
So there is this kind of sense that we want what we want, and we want it now, and we want it at the lowest possible price, and if we don't get that, we're going to jump ship and move to a different retailer. So in a way, Amazon's playing a dangerous game here. They're kind of playing a game of chicken, because if they make enough books expensive enough and difficult enough to find and deliver, consumers are going to start going elsewhere. They are going to start experimenting with those rival retailers, and Amazon might lose a little bit of its 50% of books or 65% of ebooks.
They're so big right now, though. I don't think that they're that worried about it.
No, because Amazon is not, books were kind of its avenue into online retail, but it's become a superstore.
That's true.
There's virtually no category of legal goods and services that you can't purchase through Amazon at this point. So books are a tiny little margin of their operating income.
So authors, though, should be concerned about this dispute, right? And what should they do to get involved in this?
Well, let me say right off the bat that this is not a unique problem to Hachette. Amazon has had these problems in the past. When my new book came out, I published my first two books with the University of Massachusetts Press. Not a giant Big Five publisher, but a professional publisher that is accustomed to being treated well by retailers. When my book came out, right around New Year's of this year, my publisher's distribution company was having its own pissing war with Amazon, and my book was not available on Amazon for most of the first 2 months that it was released, which significantly hurt my sales. So as an author, I'm very concerned about that. Now, that being said, I also love being an author on Amazon because most bookshops don't list my book because it's from an academic press and it's not for necessarily for a general audience. So what we want, I think, to speak for the entire class of book authors is to have a benevolent set of overlords who are in competition with one another and each want to do right by us to outdo the other player. And that makes both monopolies like Amazon and oligopolies like the Big Five publishers a problem, because in both cases they're too powerful, and ultimately they're not going to behave in a way that's in my best interest.
So are there specific actions that authors can take to join this movement?
Authors United you're talking about?
Well, you can join one of these groups. If you feel like you want to throw your hat in with the Hachette group, you could join Authors United. I think Amazon started a rival group called Readers United or something like that.
Of course.
But in reality, you're getting misinformation from both sides, right? The best thing that you can do is to try to unionize, try to lobby your congresspeople to sort out the rates at a congressional level so that the industries don't have to inside deal, and try to what I would advise is lawyer up and try to get a good contract off the bat so that no matter what happens, you're protected.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much for helping us out to understand some of the basics of this. I know a lot of our listeners are curious.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Aaron.
Sure.